start on time, so thank you. I hope your lunch was good. I enjoyed mine for sure. So we have Putting Safety First, the latest testing at GoMentum Station. Charlie Vogelheim, host of the Flying Car, is our moderator for the next session. Members of the panel would describe the latest safety and test initiatives they are implementing at GoMentum Station. I'm looking forward to this panel. Come on up, Charlie. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. I'm always excited when the panel's bigger than the audience. Hey, shush. It's not really. Thank you very much. Again, Randy and I have known each other for a little bit. I am, by title, automotive journalist. I've covered a lot of things, but it's more about information. For me, it's always been about information. I was the editor at Kelley Blue Book, and we put the information on the internet so everyone got to know that. I did some work with J.D. Power, Motor Trend Car and Driver, and now I've got a radio show I just concluded at KGO called The Flying Car. But it was all about this transformation to transportation. And it's a very exciting time, a very exciting place to be. Many years ago, about when this event started, so 6 years, so 5 years ago, there was a picture of a vehicle. It said the vehicle of the future. And the future was 2020. That's when we were all going to be having these autonomous cars bring us to and fro these events and go get our dry cleaning and pick up our kids and shoot, for all we knew it was going to have the virus for us. But none of that has happened yet because, as we learned, and as Jay mentioned earlier, it's much more complex than we thought. It's a lot more complicated than we thought. We saw early on, 5 to 10 years ago, these cars could accelerate. They could turn. They could make it around the corner. Great. That must be like that Moore's Law. Again, it's going to happen very quickly, but it didn't. As we all know, a lot of things are happening, whether it's cyclists or pets or pedestrians, and things are going on. The interesting part of all this, and we'll bring it up, is we know right now there's a 16-year-old at a DMV somewhere in this state or another that's getting a license that is nowhere near as competent as the sensors that are all over these cars right now. But they'll learn quickly and hopefully safely, and we'll have another driver on the road, and we'll have, again, somebody else to take care of later on. So we've got a great panel. The question's going to be putting safety first as we develop this autonomous cars and the ability to whatever stage they're going to be, the ADAS, the Advanced Driver Assist Systems. How can we do that? And let me go ahead and have the panel come on up here. We've got 3 panelists on location. We've got Ignacio Garcia, we've got Tim Wong, and of course Chad Partridge. I'll introduce them. And then we have 2 panelists that weren't able to attend, and they'll be on remotely. Let's kick this whole thing off. You know him, Ignacio Garcia, AAA, VP Vehicle Strategy. What's that? Autonomous vehicles. Well, eventually. We'll just say vehicles for now. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, great background. And one of the reasons that I've enjoyed attending this for many years is in the background that I get, aside from the vehicles, but all about the policy, all about the communities, the government agencies that are introducing the ability to drive the autonomous cars. And again, a big part of that through the years has been GoMentum, which now, of course, we know is managed by AAA. Ignacio, the stage is yours. Let's talk about it.
Thank you. So thank you, Charlie, and thank you very much to CCTA as well for the opportunity to be here again 1 year later and talk about the work that AAA has done in autonomous vehicles in this time. Today, you will not just hear from myself, but I'm very excited to have some of our partners join us so that you can hear from them directly as well. So at AAA, we have been there for our members, making sure they are safe on the roads for over a century. We were there from the transition from the horse and buggy to the automobile. And ever since, we have helped do things like pave roads, develop road signs, establish the DMV, and advocate for seatbelt laws. So while we are known by our 60 million members for our roadside assistance service and our yellow tow trucks, we're really so much more than that. And while a lot has happened and a lot has changed in this time, one thing that hasn't is AAA's vision. which is to serve our members' needs and be the leading public advocate for traffic safety. Within the AAA organization, my group is responsible for furthering this vision as it relates to connected and autonomous vehicles. And this is where our operation of GoMentum station comes into play.
Welcome to GoMentum Station, a private and secure 2,100-acre proving ground for connected and automated vehicles, conveniently located in Concord, California. We're the nation's largest closed-course AV test track with various environments for repeatable, automated vehicle testing. Multiple distinct testing zones allow our customers to validate their AV stack in real-world scenarios. Whether you're testing commercial trucks, passenger fleets, or connected technology, watch the full video to see how we can help you meet your AV testing needs.
So with its 23 miles of roadways, lane variety, tunnels, overpasses, posted speed limits of up to 55 miles per hour, GoMentum Station provides AV companies a very realistic environment where they can test without any public safety risk. And you will be hearing from one of those companies in a few minutes. In 2019, we worked hard to understand from our customers and partners what are their requirements to make the most out of the site. And we executed a variety of construction and improvement projects. We renovated 11 miles of roadways. We added lane markings, 73 new traffic signs, bicycle lanes, a traffic circle, a 1 mile straightaway for highway-like driving, as well as other facility improvements like the addition of on-site meetings and event spaces. But GoMentum is really more than a test track. It's at the center of this ecosystem where a variety of partners, and not just those that have a vehicle to test and are looking for roads where to test that vehicle, but that have some other stake or interest in the autonomous vehicle space, can come together and collaborate to research and advance the field of safety of AVs. In the last year, at AAA, we have co-authored 4 technical reports for SAE, Society of Automotive Engineers, as well as a number of other research projects. And today, you will hear from Metamoto on the topic of testing AVs in simulation, as well as from Rand Corporation on the topic of communicating the safety of AVs through robust safety metrics. Another improvement that we completed in 2019 is our V2X lab. It's a secure environment for repeatable testing with communications equipment from multiple vendors, where cities can come and learn and test these new technologies without disrupting live traffic. And again, later today, you will hear from our partner Trafficware about their work in this space. Finally, AAA is involved in many other projects outside of GoMentum Station. And I wanted to highlight just a couple of them. One is our partnership with CCTA on state and federal grants to help bring these technologies to the public and demonstrate AVs locally. And my favorite is our partnership with Waymo on the Let's Talk Self-Driving campaign, where we introduced lesson plan about how to be safe around AVs to the AAA School Safety Patrol program, which is taught to kids in 4th to 6th grade. So as you can tell, we've been really busy. It's been a very busy year, and we are very excited about continuing the work in 2020 and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So what we're going to do, and thank you, Ignacio, is we're going to have each of the panelists give a little bit of a presentation. You can go ahead and sit down, and we'll bring up each of the panelists. They'll give a little presentation on what they're doing, and then we'll join the discussion with all of them later. Before we do, again, a big fan of AAA. My children's great-grandfather came out to Hollywood to be in the movies, but ended up putting signs up for AAA on speed limits around. So, but it was a great career. When I traveled around, and this whole concept of autonomous was just starting out, as I would visit the automakers at the Detroit Auto Show or anywhere else, they say, oh, you need to talk to NVIDIA because they're kind of the brains of the operation in a lot of these OEM developments. So we're so pleased to have Tim Wong here, NVIDIA, the head of technical marketing. Thanks. Let's get a little background, please.
So I just have a single video I'm going to show, but it actually covers a lot of different things. So NVIDIA, the first thing is that's a simulation system that we developed and we're selling to customers. Toyota was our first customer, and now we're pretty much selling it to everyone. But the whole point is you need to trick the car computer to be able to think it's actually on the road, because you can't put that many cars in a data center, but you can put a lot of these car computers when they're in a rack. And the whole point is that I can create this synthetic environment. And where this is powerful is that when you're testing on road, 99% of your miles you drive on road, nothing happens. What matters are scenarios. I need to know when a little 3-year-old girl dressed in dark clothes at night in the rain runs across the street. I don't want to necessarily stage that and put someone in harm's way, but I need to know what happens. So being able to fool the car computer with visually accurate sensor data, LiDAR, radar, cameras, ultrasonic sensors, I can put water on the road. We're essentially trying to sim the world and being able to do these scenarios. So overnight I can do a couple million scenarios, so I can have confidence that when I do put the car on the road, I actually know what's going to happen. We can do complex things, like this is actually 4 autonomous cars all headed toward each other, but again, they all understand where they're about to be and they can avoid it. Doing emergency maneuvers. Now certainly what's nice about GoMentum Station, and we are testing at GoMentum Stations, I can do things like this at GoMentum Station. I certainly don't want to do this on a public road and bring it to a stop just to see if my car stops in time. But we need to know what happens. Same thing with being able to swerve around traffic at a high speed. What's interesting is when you get into simulation, the car dynamics become very interesting. And so understanding, I think right now the model is 200 different attributes to tread wear, gas tank 3/4 full, empty, really understanding how the car is going to react to different things based on physics. And the whole value chain here is that I can scale this testing. If I have a number of servers, this is 10 different servers running 10 different scenarios at the same time, you can run thousands. If you run thousands, then you can get to the billion scenarios overnight and have confidence when you put that car on the road. What's really cool, though, is that we use this ourselves. So we did a drive that you're about to see from 280 to 92 to 101 to 85. And we went around it about 1.5 times, so 77 miles. And we did it fully autonomously the whole time, and you're about to see it. But what was cool was we figured out when we merge onto 280, no one drives the speed limit on 280. So we actually found that in sim, we figured this out, that we had to go faster. And so we actually were able to debug some of the drive in sim before we actually put the car on the road. But here we are entering 280. And what's cool about this drive is you'll see the side-by-side sim versus reality, but we heavily use sim. There's also a left-hand merge, I think, from 85 to 101. And again, we had to know that at the bottom of the exit ramp, we need to be going freeway speed or you won't be able to merge in. So it was really helpful to do this testing in sim and then also be able to test on road. But what I would have loved to do is we weren't part of GoMentum Station yet, so with traffic lights and all these things, now we can do that testing on private roads that you can't do safely on roads. For instance, I was coming out of right here, so Bishop Ranch onto Community Remote, and light turned green, and I started to go, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw that someone was about to blow the red light. And sure enough, he went through the red light at 70 plus. Now, if I wasn't paying attention, if I didn't see out of the corner of my eye, I would have smashed right into them. That's why on our camera, you can see there's a lot of sensors on our car, but most importantly, we have 2 cameras and 2 radars that are pointed at an angle away, 45 degrees away, for high-speed cross traffic. And that's why, this is sim versus reality. This is why testing is so important. And I love that at GoMentum Station, I can model that exact scenario because they've got traffic lights. I can do the high-speed detection, make sure that the car detects it before it enters the roadway, keeping the driver and the occupant safe at all times. So we'll let it run through, but It did a great job that I actually am in the camera car, so I'm actually following the autonomous car. So this is my view. But the fact that it stayed autonomous for that full hour and did those different freeway merges is a testament to where autonomous vehicle technology is happening. And we don't handle the exits yet, so he has to say disengage. But actually now we do. We actually recently added stop lights and stop signs. So this is NVIDIA.
Thank you very much. So a couple things. First of all, I'm sorry I almost hit you this morning, but I was in a hurry to get here, and we promised we weren't going to talk about it. And then who didn't think about Pac-Man when you were doing the little mapping thing going around there? I think that would be a great sound effect. Seriously, the NVIDIA has been now in OEMs for about how many years now?
Actually, more than 12 because we were in the infotainment space first.
Right.
And then about 6 years ago, we started autonomous vehicle development.
Well, and we'll get into it in the conversation, but what I think is so interesting is that, again, you were part of the brain. You were part, as a GPU system developed to be able to make all the computations. But now you're beyond that, where you're developing the actual operating system to a certain extent. So we'll get into a little bit more of that. Unable to join us right now. Laura, are you out there? We're going to go to the Zoom.
Whoa, that is.
Isn't that fun to see? Yeah, you're on the big screen. No. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Laura Fraud-Bernard, did I get that right?
Very close.
Well, okay, I'll take it. She's with RAND, a policy researcher. So I'd love to get a background on how RAND is involved.
Absolutely. So I'm an injury epidemiologist, and RAND itself is a nonprofit, nonpartisan research organization devoted to improving public policy. Today, as Ignacio mentioned, RAND has done some work, very, very fortunately sponsored by AAA and CNU. So I'm just going to get a very brief overview of that work, specifically focusing on operational design domain. Why ODD is so very important is because it really contextualizes where the AV drives and also the statistics or the information we get about their driving performance. It's also highly important because when we're comparing AVs to human-driven vehicles, we need to make sure that we're always comparing like with like. That's to say, we need to make sure we're comparing AV data from that very specific ODD compared to human-driven data in terms of events and vehicle miles traveled from that same type of ODD. Otherwise, we're either unfairly advantaging AVs or disadvantaging them. So next slide. I'm going to very briefly talk about what are the goals of an ODD, how are ODDs described, and then what is good ODD policy. So let's start out with what are the goals of ODD. Can you advance once?
Next slide.
So the goal of an ODD is really to specify function. Next slide. So ODDs really articulate the borders of where the AV can operate and from a business viewpoint, where they'd really like to operate. Of course, there's going to be a lot more potential customers in downtown San Francisco than there will be in that other picture, which is Death Valley. Although that Death Valley customer may be pretty enthusiastic about getting a ride. Next slide. ODDs are developed through driving in a wide variety of situations. We've already heard actually about all three, so I thank you for bringing those in. These include simulation, closed course, and public roads. And we can think about the qualities of these situations varying based on three axes: validity, or how much the setting actually represents the environment in which the AV will drive; variability, or how much variation is there existing in that environment; and then controllability, how much control does the developer have over the situation. So one more clip. Thanks. So simulation has high controllability, high variability, but high validity. Basically, whatever the developer can dream and program, they can do, be that the surface of downtown San Francisco or the surface of Mars. But we'll never really know how much that simulation, especially in the case of Mars, represents the real world setting in a simulation until they actually get into the real world. Click, please. Thanks. So closed course testing, such as could occur at GoMentum, will have medium controllability, medium validity, and medium variability. Closed courses are generally limited by space, not a huge concern at GoMentum, but also issues like earthworks, funding, and the civil engineering that is possible. One more click. Public roads, of course, have very high validity because they're basically the environment in which the vehicle will be functioning. And they also have very high variability, but low controllability. The developer basically can't decide or control what happens besides the decision to go into or outside of autonomy. Now, because of the immense number of different characteristics that make up an ODD, you can conceive of all these characteristics of the environment being like beads on a string. And because of the combinatorial complexity that exists here, it's impossible on public roads to test all the various possible combinations of what may happen in an ODD on public roads without driving hundreds of millions, if not billions, of vehicle miles. That's why testing on closed course, and especially in simulation, is so important, because these are environments that you can very easily and efficiently test huge amounts of varieties of scenarios. Next slide. So, how are ODDs described? Well, the answer is, click. Thanks. As thoroughly as possible. Next slide. Can you click 3 times this time? Thanks. I'm not going to go over this in precise detail, mostly because of time, but suffice to say that this is drawing from traditional viewpoints of how ODDs are generally described. Generally, they're discussed in terms of situation-based, what's the topography, the weather, the physical infrastructure in the roadway or near the roadway, driving practices, who will the AV share the roadway with. It can also include considerations of V to X, considerations of stored information, what the vehicle knows before it leaves the house. And it can also include exceptions, no-go zones such as construction, school zones, hospitals, etc. Next slide. The problem here is that essentially any taxonomy of ODDs has to be exhaustive, because otherwise we risk the possibility of false positives where the AV thinks it's in its ODD, but it's not, or false negatives where it is in its ODD, but it doesn't think it is. False negatives obviously are tedious. False positives are very, very dangerous. The taxonomy also has to be completely up to date, difficult in a constantly changing environment. An AV from 5 years ago probably didn't have to consider, for example, e-scooters or e-bikes. And the taxonomy categories also need to be mutually exclusive, which is really difficult. If you think about just simply amount of lighting, that could be affected or be in the category of everything from street lamps to time of day, to time of year, to even how much reflectivity is coming off the buildings. Next slide. So none of these are completely possible, which is why testing and verification of processes and having fallback measures is so important. Next slide. So what is good ODD policy? Click, please. Thanks. That would be a precise policy that's adapted to the changing needs of the environment. One more. Can you move ahead, please? Thanks. So when we think about ODD policy, these are the types of questions to ask. First of all, where is evidence coming from? Is it coming from public roads? Is it coming from simulation or test tracks? And what does that mean in terms of the evidence's utility and validity? How are developers building confidence in their ODDs? How precise are ODDs being defined by both the developer, being communicated to the regulator, and then being communicated to the public? And should a region consider dictating minimal competencies? Will that make it easier or harder? Next slide. So I do want to very much thank Xantha Brusso and everyone, and Ignacio, and everyone at AAA and CNU for sponsoring this research. The formal report will be available soon, and I do one more slide. Want to note all of Rand's other research on the topic of AV work, which is available for free on our website. And of course, my email, in case there are any questions that don't come up that you'd like answered during the question and answer section. Thanks.
Okay. And just to clarify, that last slide had a lot of information. Randy, did the attendees get a chance to get a copy of that? Or okay, wonderful. You'll get a copy of that. Laura, where are you now?
I'm in very cloudy Santa Monica, where it is raining.
Okay.
Yes.
It never rains in California. Again, and you went through that so quickly. I know you're a biostatistician of some, and what was the other word that you used in your description?
So I cannot claim to be a biostatistician,
Okay.
although I work with them and respect them immensely. I'm an injury epidemiologist, which is a very fancy way of saying I study risk and uncertainty specifically within the context of motor vehicle safety statistics.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. It's a nice tie-in there that we're talking about when we talk about real world, talk about simulation, and then again, some of the measurements that brings it all together. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation. Let's come back to the audience, to the board here, to the panel. Chad Partridge is the CEO of Metamoto that Ignacio introduced. Thanks, Chad. Tell us more about it.
Thank you. Thanks. It's always great when you give presentations and the person before you did something that's very, very relevant that you didn't expect. The RAND report, Driving for Safety, which is about doing billions of tests to validate safety, was a very, very large inspiration for us, in particular Metamoto, when we founded our company in September of 2016, and very much drives the need for simulation and why simulation is important. So I'm the CEO of Metamoto. Our offering is simulation as a service for autonomous systems. We also provide enterprise solutions built around that and services to do those integrations. Next slide.
There's a clicker on the podium if you want to do it
Thank you.
yourself.
Yeah, you have to do it yourself.
Okay, that's very good.
It's not autonomous.
All right. Okay, great. Thank you. So the problem, why is simulation essentially important for autonomous systems? So it's really important to identify what's different about us driving a car versus the autonomous system. Well, it's the software, of course. It's obviously the software. And we have many, many, many years of software engineering experience. But this is without a doubt the most complex software problem in history. And it brings to bear the most difficult challenges in being able to test and validate and assure that it's safe. And the way you do this, you have a system with infinite inputs and infinite things that can happen. And what we've evolved into for autonomy testing is this scenario-based testing, where you're throwing at the system everything that could possibly happen, and you're throwing at it in every way that could you could throw at. You're throwing everything at it every day, because the software is changing in ways sometimes you don't know exactly how the software has changed day to day, and that's truly based on a lot of the machine learning practices that we have. And this problem is not necessarily unique just to driverless cars, but this is also true for all mobility applications, delivery robots, trucking. In Metamoto, we're seeing applications in automated warehousing, in mining, in agriculture. So the solution here is massively scalable simulation, taking all of your scenarios, parameterizing them in all the ways that you can think of, and every night running through all your simulations. So here's just a very simple example of this, where we're doing a driverless car that we're simultaneous changing weather conditions, road conditions, time of day. So the Metamoto solution, we have three parts to it. The designer, we're bringing in scenes, we're bringing in scenarios. It's a scenario creation and editing tool. It's also a vehicle configuration tool. Everything within it is designed from the ground up to be parameterized. So then, on the director, this is the capability for the massively scalable simulation. You build your software, you run all of your tests every day across all of your parameters, and you're assuring day in, day out that your system is safe. And then our analyzer. Think of it as an autonomous systems debugger. You can dive deep. You can see everything that happened. So your team might come in at the beginning of the day saying, oh, here's the test that failed last night. Let's go back and find out exactly what happened, and let's make sure that we get it right before we bring it out into the real world. Okay, so bringing this back, what are we doing? We've talked a lot about simulation. So what are we doing with AAA and GoMentum? And in previous presentations, and hopefully you're getting the idea now, simulation is, of course, very important. Closed course testing is, of course, very important. And public testing is very important. And it's very, very important to correlate simulation results with real-world results. So currently today, we're working with GoMentum, and you can see the bunker environment. We are building a digital twin of the GoMentum environment, and we are correlating simulation tests with the closed course tests, and I'll talk more about this. We've also successfully done this with a number of other open courses. We're doing a lot of work with open source stacks. So you'll see with a lot of companies, there's a lot of companies, and this will probably be a theme in our panel, that have their private stack. And we're publicly not seeing the results of those stacks. An advantage of a lot of the open source stacks are they're public. We could publish the results of those stacks so that you can see the safety and the progress that we're making. And we want to be able to do a lot more of that at GoMentum Station. So AutoWare is the most popular open source stack out there today. We've done a lot of work with a number of customers. I'm going to show you some results that we've done with autonomous stuff. We started in Peoria, Illinois, doing testing with the AutoWare stack. We want to do the same thing, but on a much grander scale at GoMentum Station. Okay, so here you can see some of our simulation results that we did with autonomous stuff in Peoria, Illinois, and how it's correlated with the real world results. That we have a number of interested customers. In the real world, we can capture these scenarios. We can replay them in simulation. And we can very accurately show what the distinctions and the difference, how much they correlate, and do what we need to do to tighten up the difference. Okay, so what we do very often is we go out, we capture ROS bags. So at GoMentum Station, we'll run through all types of various scenarios. We can capture those scenarios exactly. We can replay those exactly in simulations, and then we could parameterize on top of that, changing the weather, injecting various noises, injecting noise. And we can be able to identify the exact performance boundaries of the system of when things start breaking down. And then we can go back out into the track, develop new scenarios on lessons learned and things that we've learned, and build up a large database of scenarios paired with that digital twin. And so not only are we learning things about more scenarios that we need to test against, we're also learning day in, day out as our software is changing for the vehicle on the road, what was breaking now versus what was breaking before. And day in, day out, we build more trust in the simulation that we're testing against, that it really truly represents what we're doing on the closed loop track. And then as we build our repository out, we have great validation that everything's passing, and then we know it's going to be safe at the closed course station, and then of course it's going to be safe out on the public roads. We're working with SAE IAMTS for starters, which is for mobility. We're doing testing and safety. We're publishing a lot of our cooperative results with that in correlation of physical testing with simulation testing, and we've got a lot of exciting things ahead, and we're also working on mutual programs with customers at GoMentum Station, and we're really excited about our partnership with AAA and everything that we have ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Could you pull Laura up? I have a quick question tied together. So, but first, Chad, obviously you and Tim were both showing simulation. Friend or foe, NVIDIA? And
I say friend. I mean, we have an open platform. I'm happy to have you guys build on top of it, but no, by no means I don't think it's competitive.
We also don't think it's competitive either. The one thing about NVIDIA is you guys do produce a heck of a good stack too. And a lot of that is you're doing, whereas you might not be doing things as much with AutoWare, you're doing things with your own stack. It's competitive, but they exist side by side.
Interesting. And then Laura, going back to what you were talking about, the operational design domain, and all three of you, you're showing some real world experiences and then simulation and developing deeper. I guess a chicken and egg question, what comes first, or do you build upon some of the simulation that they're developing?
Oftentimes, and they can speak to their exact processes, but this isn't a one-way street. There's iterations where you simulate it, you have increasing sophistication in your simulation, then perhaps you move to a closed course with the same type of maneuvers in the same environments, and then go to a public road, and then take that type of information and head back to the simulator to feed it back in. One of the difficulties is on public roads, you kind of know what situation you're testing because you can say what time of day it is and what kind of street you're on and what kind of weather it is. But at the end of the day, you can't control exactly what happens. You can control exactly what happens in the simulator, so you can mimic the public road in a simulator. But in a simulator, you can also test every single little possible variation. If the sun was slightly at a different angle, if traffic was slightly heavier, or slightly lighter, or slightly different in terms of its mix. Those are kind of the benefits of how one can reinforce and gain confidence of the other.
Yeah.
I also want to note one thing in my presentation that I was remiss on. I wanted to thank my co-author, who I believe is in the audience, Maynard Holiday. I don't know, Maynard, if you're there.
Oh, Maynard's very excited. Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. I did want to mention that. My apologies for the omission.
No, the one thing on your presentation, I was going to mention that first illustration that you have, which I think is wonderful and I've seen in others, is that the autonomous car and the family going down the road and they're playing board games because that's what a family would do if they had an autonomous car. So, again, Tim and Chad, Tim, you mentioned the word scenario, and you talked about how, again, that's one of the advantages. So creating the scenario, or what you determine to be a scenario worth conquering, so to speak, how does that come into play?
So, for better or worse, you yourself can imagine millions of scenarios, but we've actually polled insurance companies like AAA,
Yeah.
who have a lot of input for scenarios, DMV, CHP, DOT, lots of acronyms. But basically, there's no shortage of scenarios to test. And you can take each scenario, like your Metamoto was talking about, and you can vary it. Vary the time of day, have the sun in your eyes, have water on the road, loose gravel on the road. And so you quickly see how, even if you have a base of several thousand scenarios, that can become several million very quickly. And that's exactly what we see, is that there absolutely is no shortage. What I would love to have happen is have a standard set of scenarios, and whether that's a billion or so that everyone's testing toward, and figure out all the corner cases we want to cover, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, and whether they're corner cases or, again, just experiences. I saw, again, Laura, when you had the list up there of the different ODDs as you were showing them, and I used that example of somebody going to get a driver's license test. I can't imagine them having to pass all those. Let me see you drive at night. Let me see you drive on a wet road, dry road, fast, slow, uphill, downhill, everything in between.
Actually, it's worse. My daughter just got her license, and she didn't have to parallel park. All she had to do is pull to the curb and back up 4 car lengths. And I'm like, that isn't even close to parking. But that's actually what the testers reduced to today.
Wow. I think she should have done it in a diesel
Oh,
truck
no,
with a manual transmission.
Before she could drive, she had to pass my test. She passed the road test fine, but she had to pass me as well.
Okay. Well, we've got one more panel member, and Dustin, thanks you for your patience. I'm sorry you couldn't be here also. Dustin Hines is with Cubic Slant Trafficware. He's the ITS specialist. Dustin, are you online? Can you hear us?
I'm here. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can. How you feeling?
I just got done playing board games with my family.
Oh, good. Well, thanks for being here. Dustin actually doesn't feel very well, so he's got a good excuse for taking the video route here. Thanks for being with us. Let's talk a little bit about Trafficware and how you contribute to safety.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks again for the opportunity. I think I'm going to come at this from a slightly different angle than some of the other panel members here, and hopefully that's helpful. You please advance the slide. A little background on Trafficware. We are a company that's a Cubic company. So Cubic is a publicly traded company based here in California. They work primarily in the tolling space. So in the Bay Area, if you've ever used the Clipper card when you get on barge or on a ferry, that's all Cubic. Trafficware is kind of the traffic arm of the company, and we are based in Sugar Land, Texas, just outside of Houston. That's where all of our design and manufacturing and engineering occurs. And we've been helping agencies for the past 4 decades or so solve transportation issues. Go ahead and move on to the next slide. So we have quite a history of innovation. We have a team of transportation engineers on staff that design all of our solutions. If you've only heard of one thing that Trafficware does, it's probably our flagship project, which is Synchro. And Synchro is a tool used all over the world that allows traffic engineers to analyze the way that traffic work by inputting volume data and things of that nature. We also have an ATMS central system platform, which is kind of the springboard or the foundation for all of our smart city applications that we're going to delve a little bit more deeply into. One of those is Synchro Green, which is an adaptive solution. It's deployed all across the United States. And another that we've started to have kind of a lot of traction with over the past few years is our connected vehicle application, which has been deployed also all across the country. So if we move on to the next slide, in addition to Synchro ATMS and Synchro Green, I wanted to highlight a few of our other smart city applications because they're going to kind of come to light as we move through some of the stuff that we're doing at the GoMentum station. We have a transit signal priority application that helps move buses and light rail more efficiently. We have emergency vehicle preemption applications that help emergency vehicles arrive at accidents and incidents more quickly. And then we also have a signal performance measurement cloud package that allows agencies to more analytically take a look at how they're processing traffic on primarily their signalized intersections and be proactive in the way that they change those signals and update them as the travel patterns change, as they of course do. And then beneath all of the kind of the sexy stuff, the applications, is the hardware or the infrastructure. And so Trafficware also has a host of controllers, cabinets, and detection equipment that's kind of the eyes and the ears and the computation tool of a lot of our smart city applications. So moving on to the next slide, talking about connected vehicle. Connected vehicle, really a broad topic with a lot of subsets. The spot that we play in primarily has to do with the transfer of signal phasing and timing data from the infrastructure, or in this case, the controller, to the vehicle. So this is a transfer of the real-time traffic signal data coming from these signals, high-resolution data captured in a tenth of a second, that's then passed along to the vehicles. And it may be a vehicle manufacturer, it may be a data aggregator, or some other technology company that processes that data and creates something useful that a driver can then use as they're traveling the roadways. And these are primarily focused on efficiency and safety. So if we can go ahead and advance 2 slides, it looks like now. I wanted to highlight just a couple of our connected vehicle applications. So one is our connected vehicle module that allows the city to store and distribute all of that high resolution data that's so valuable when you are creating these applications. And then it makes that data available to the car manufacturers, the data aggregators, and academia, so that we can get it in the hands of smart people and they can do all kinds of amazing things with that data that's available in those traffic controllers. The connected vehicle module was designed in tandem with the city of Palo Alto in about 2016. Tidal Wave has come about more recently. It's a cloud-hosted solution that we offer that takes all of that signal phasing and timing data, makes it available to those that want to use it to develop apps, but it takes kind of the burden of administering and supporting that data off of the plate of the agency, and it's something that Trafficware can handle directly for that agency. Both of these applications, it's important to point out, are compatible with multiple different protocols. So we haven't kind of cemented our foot in a particular camp. We work with all kinds of different communications protocols. So one more slide, advance please. We have a number of agencies across the country that are now using our connected vehicle applications. There's more than 3,000 intersections in the U.S. using it. The folks that I wanted to highlight that are nearby, that may be in the room today, City of Palo Alto and City of Walnut Creek are a couple of agencies here in the Bay Area that are currently using our connected vehicle module and our tidal wave application. So I wanted to switch gears and now talk a little bit about what we're doing in partnership with GoMentum Station. So we're very proud to be partnering with the GoMentum Station and working on lots of cool new emerging technologies. So next slide. Specifically, we have a cabinet that is a Trafficware cabinet out there that was in the previous image. And so that is a ATC class cabinet. It works in tandem with our ATC class controllers. So we have a controller out there as well, and it runs our controller software, and it allows a lot of the testing and development that takes place out there in the V2X lab. So if we move to the next slide, I wanted to highlight one of the, kind of a spotlight on one of the applications that I know we've been spending a lot of time on in the region, and that is transit signal priority. So transit signal priority, in a nutshell, allows an agency to modify the timing of a signal to promote the passage of a bus or light rail through that signal. You can imagine there may be more people on that bus than there is in single capacity idling cars at an intersection. And so it makes sense from an efficiency standpoint to give that bus either an early green or an extended green to make sure that it gets through the intersection as efficiently as possible. This allows them to improve their service and increase, ridership, taking some of the stress off of the congestion in the existing roadways. So that's just one of many projects and applications that are being developed at the V2X lab with the Trafficware hardware. And one more slide, and that'll be my final one, just to highlight some of the lessons learned. I think from our standpoint, there are a lot of agencies that are interested in delving into this space and starting to do connected vehicle applications and more efficiently process traffic and improve safety. And one of the discussions that I'm typically having with these agencies is encouraging them to work on infrastructure. So in order to do all of these things, you have to have good eyes and ears out there at the signalized intersections. And that means making sure that your cabinets, your controllers, your communications protocols, and your detection equipment are all of modern era and working quite well and easy to maintain. So I'm constantly preaching updating infrastructure. Another important thing is integration between equipment and software manufacturers like Trafficware and our partners, making sure that we are, to the extent possible, communicating with each other and allowing applications to be designed that really leverage our capabilities as an industry. And then finally, one of the things that we've learned, and I've already heard it discussed by previous speakers here, is the importance not only of focusing on traffic flow and efficiencies, but never losing sight of the number one priority, and of course, that's safety. That rounds out my slides. Thank you again for the time.
Okay, Dustin, thank you. Quick question on your work out at GoMentum, as I'm seeing the one slide there. Curious about, are you just bringing your technology to GoMentum, or are you also utilizing the GoMentum as a closed environment that then you can test some of your traffic solutions?
Yes, I believe that we are doing a lot of work out there in coordination with other manufacturers and agencies. I know my colleagues have spent time out there taking agencies out to kind of see some of the hardware and the software that's running out at the GoMentum station, and definitely using that facility to the advantage of our partners and our customers to continue to move forward with solving the problems that they face in their daily lives.
And when you, again, you made mention of locally Palo Alto, and what was the other city you said you did?
Walnut Creek.
Walnut Creek, thank you. I find interesting, again, traffic flow. I mean, obviously it's fluid, so as you're creating a solution, then your challenges are also changing as you're getting the traffic flow to change relative to the traffic lights, et cetera. Can you speak to that just a little bit? Ongoing, it's not like you just push the button and now it's changed and it's different. It's got to be an ongoing process.
Right, and that's why it's very important to have real-time data, or as close to real-time data as you can get. I mentioned earlier updating infrastructure. So a lot of the work that we tend to do on the outset of some of our ITS projects has to do with making sure that detection is updated and is maintained properly and has the capability to provide us with that real-time picture of what the traffic looks like, so we don't create a scenario where we're kind of chasing our tail and adapting and changing things to something that may no longer exist out there. We want to have good, reliable detection that leads to solid scientific decisions.
Okay, and we're going to add right to that in the conversation. Thank you very much, Dustin. Appreciate the background on your product, your solutions. But going to now back to the panel, and hope you can hear us off-site also. I have a couple questions to follow up on. Hopefully we'll have time to get to the audience questions. But along that topic, and Ignacio, I'll start with you. What can cities do with technologies that can be deployed now to improve the regions? And we'll talk about safety and even congestion. So what are there learnings that can be deployed right now?
Well, what I think I can talk about is that I mentioned before in my presentation very briefly, is our participation with CCTA in a 4-year program that is partially funded by the US DOT to demonstrate automated driving systems in real environments. And this particular program includes 3 deployments. One is a low-speed autonomous shuttle in a retirement community in Rossmore here in Walnut Creek.
Which, by the way, sounded very fun, and I'm already in line to live there, so go on.
Well, we'll hopefully deploy sooner than that. The other one is, again, another shuttle, in this case, at the county hospital in Martinez, and that one will feature a self-docking wheelchair system. Okay. And then the final one is along the I-680 corridor, just to help prepare that very heavily circulated transit corridor for connected autonomous vehicles, which could increase the capacity of those roads. So I think to your question, there is a lot that cities can do, and we've heard about different pieces. And the approach we took is, well, let's start somewhere. Let's pick some specific technologies that we know can deliver a benefit, and let's try to deliver that benefit, even if it's in a very specific community, right? But hopefully we can then prove that it works, and then it can be scaled from there.
Yeah, and again, just to continue the conversation with you, Tim and Chad, again, how do the cities, how can they, not only safety but congestion, is there something on the simulation solution side that they should be thinking about?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, on the simulation side, I mean, we talked a lot about digital twins during the presentations. You know, there's a lot of companies that develop HD maps and HD mapping technologies for their solutions, which is a big part of navigation and localization for autonomous systems. But there's going to be an evolution towards, you know, not only you heard in our talks about scenario databases with large scene repositories, you know, assuring safety, but every major city that's going to be using autonomous systems are going to require, you know, common scenes and maps of their environment and demonstration of using, you know, the autonomous systems operating in those environments. And I'm surprised, and this will be certainly a theme as we talk more, that the public doesn't demand more of demonstration of you know, companies publishing their results, you know, guaranteeing safety, and particularly in the particular environments that people care about. So I think that, you know, promoting, you know, digital twin environments prove to us that this is safe is going to become very important.
Anything you want to add to that, Tim?
Absolutely. So besides scenarios, what we see is that you need accident data, right? But more important than accident data, which actually is, there are many different databases, I want near-miss data. I want the accidents that are really close, but to make sure, to validate in simulation, that the autonomous vehicle would handle the near-miss correctly and not get into an accident. So there's just a lot of data, as well as HD maps. You know, there are different cities that are actually providing HD map data. An HD map, if you don't know, is a high-res map of road features, so I know exactly how wide each lane marking is, how high the curb is. I know a lot more about the road than just a normal nav database.
Yeah. Laura, is there anything you want to add to that conversation?
Well, I want to echo, especially the last two people, what they're saying about the importance of gathering more data on human-driven vehicle performance, how we drive now. And it seems a little counterintuitive in certain ways to say, to understand how AVs drive, we need to understand better how humans drive. Aside from the reasons that are already given about the importance of identifying hotspots and near misses and challenges that AVs are likely to have before they're actually there having those challenges, the most common comparison we hear for AV performance is they have to be safer than either the average human driver or a safe human driver. If a vehicle's ODD is downtown San Francisco, it's really not fair to compare them to even all of California, much less the national average, because it's giving the AV a harder situation because they're driving in a harder environment. We really need to be able to get precise data about human-driven vehicles, both their crashes and the mileage, so that we can appropriately compare AV data to the exact same type of human-driven data driving in those same types of circumstances.
Well, we did a survey, you're not here, but everyone in the room here is an above-average driver, so just wanted to make sure you knew that. It's interesting, and it kind of rolls into my next question, Laura, I appreciate, is, again, that's one of, and maybe there are other issues that we still need to solve with this AV technology. Certainly, one level might be to grade or to, you know, again, have that benchmark that we can identify. But is there anything else within AV technology development before we can start to see broader deployment that comes to mind?
Oh my goodness, I suspect that would be multiple days of conversations into on itself.
Yeah.
Possibly one of the earliest questions that we can ask is the idea of comparing AVs to anything, be it average human drivers, safe human drivers, some sort of abstract goal that we have, is we need to figure out what is AV safety. And it sounds glib, but when we're going to think about safe enough, is that Is that a threshold on the spectrum that exists of safety level of performances? How do we know when AVs are at that threshold? How do we make sure that that threshold appropriately incentivizes the right behavior, the safe behavior? These are all questions that may seem a little rooted in philosophy, but they actually need to be answered on a very, very concrete and precise way.
Yeah. Dustin, would you like to add to that a little bit?
Sure. To be frank, much of my experience is more on the connected vehicle side than the AVs necessarily, but I do have, my own perspectives, and I think, safety tends to be the largest hurdle, just giving up control tends to be the largest hurdle in large-scale adoption of the AV technologies that I hear about when I'm in discussions with, different agencies and different folks in the industry. I think as the younger drivers, we talked a little bit about, the folks that are getting their driver's license now. My son's 4 years old, and I would hazard a guess that he will be much more comfortable with the idea of an automated vehicle than I ever will, just growing up with that kind of technology more at his fingertips. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, and again, please, Tim, you ready?
So one of the things that hasn't been solved, so stepping back a second, perception, which we've all talked about, I think is well understood. It's understanding that really needs to be worked on. And when I say understanding, we grow up, especially if you're a driver, a teen driver, 16 years being human. So we know that if there's a line of parked cars and someone's holding the brake, that means there's someone in the car and they may get out, which means that door could open, right? We understand that as humans. If a ball rolls in the road, kid or dog's gonna follow. The ball can clear the car, it's not an object in its path anymore, but yet we know there's a risk. More importantly, I was driving my daughter, and there was a car in a driveway about to pull out in front of us, turn left in front of us. The driver was looking the other way. So I told her, slow down, honk your horn, make sure the driver sees you, and they pulled out right as we got there without looking, and we almost hit them, but my daughter hit the brakes, and we averted it, but she said, if you hadn't said anything, I would have hit them. I said, yeah, that's defensive driving. You have to predict bad behavior. This is what we don't have in AVs yet, and we need to work on.
Yeah. Would you like to add anything? I've got other questions also.
Yeah, so people ask me, when is autonomous driving going to happen? And I always say that it's never a question of when, it's a question of where. And, everybody's ultimately right now, Waymo is a great example that they're testing in a very geo-fenced community in Phoenix, just outside of Phoenix. And there's a support team on every corner, and nothing could really go wrong. It's a matter, deploying, it's a matter of scale. It's a matter of saying, like, I can assure that this is going to be safe in a wider environment than this, and that I can account for every single possibility. It's a matter of scale, and it's a matter of proof. And we haven't even hit the level of scale yet that we can really account for all the parameters and all the possibilities that can happen. And there might even be another iteration of machine learning technology that has to happen for that too. But it's also a matter of, does the public, are we publishing, have we given everybody assurances that this is safer than human drivers? And I don't think that either case is really true. So not only does the technology improve, but I also do think that we have to go to a much farther length to establish better metrics that say that we can assure that this is going to be safe for average Joe. And that just hasn't happened yet.
Well, the interesting thing, too, is, and Jay Rogers brought it up in the very first panel, if you may remember, we need to be reminded we're at this level where there are tens of thousands of people killed every year. We're not at a 0 point, and we're going to put these out there that are going to cause more danger. We're at this crazy point where they could indeed cause less danger, less injury, less deaths. But how do you measure something like that? Laura, do you want to jump in on that one?
carefully.
Yeah.
So as you cogently put forward, the general way that we've historically measured road traffic safety is in deaths and injuries, and hundreds of millions of dollars spent on all of those. As we all know at this point, that doesn't really work out very well for AVs, mostly because those are retrospective data, and you need to know about how safe these vehicles will be in advance. We can't wait or ask companies to drive hundreds of millions, if not billions, of vehicle miles in order to get a statistically valid crash rate that we could compare to average human drivers, even assuming that average human drivers is the right thing to compare to. And I believe it was the gentleman from NVIDIA who brought up this concept earlier of needing what we can consider to be leading measures. These are proxy measures or measures of behavior, pre-crash measures that are linked to crashes, things like near misses, things like safety violations, things like violations of the airspace around the vehicle, rapid accelerations or decelerations. Instantaneous safety metrics, if the metric says, hey, the rate of likelihood of crash is too high. All of these together give us an idea of how safe this vehicle will be at a much lower amount or a much lower quantity of miles traveled, simply because, honestly, they happen a lot more frequently. We've already heard several examples today of near misses. Hopefully, we haven't heard any examples today of crashes. So we can get these rates a lot sooner, and they can inform us a lot quicker about how safe these vehicles are.
Yeah, one of the questions I wanted to ask, and I'm going to ask it first. Again, we have agencies in the room here, and wondering when and how does a regulatory agency certify an autonomous vehicle, or at least even a highly automated vehicle? Tim, I'm going to start with you only because, and again, not to pick on your daughter, but you just experienced the learning process of a teenager in driving, and you're around NVIDIA, and you've seen the capability of the vehicles. Did you find yourself comparing the two every now and then?
Absolutely. One of the things I learned really quick is when the autonomous car learns something, it doesn't forget. I tell my daughter to do something, the next day she does it again, and I squirm in my seat. So yes, it was automatic for me to compare autonomous car versus my daughter. But that said, I could tell my daughter things about defensive driving, and she got it. We still don't know how to model that within the autonomous car.
Yeah. Ignacio, please.
Well, yeah, you asked about regulating, and we've talked about consumers and the need for assurance. So I just wanted to share. Every year, AAA has been surveying motorists across the country on their perception of autonomous vehicles, because I think that can give us some clues as to where should we focus and what does the public need, right? Because it will really be a pity if all this great work was not accepted and these technologies were not used, right, for problems that could have been addressed, right? So the last edition of the survey, the results were made public just last week, and I think that on the positive side, consumers are wanting to have more information. They want to know, right, about these technologies, and the topics specifically that they mention are in ranked order. They want to know what's the liability, what happens if something happens, what's the legal framework around the vehicles, are they not only safe but secure? Could they be hacked? And also, but this is interesting, it was lower in the list, just how do they work, right? And because those are some items where consumers are telling us we don't have enough information yet, when we ask them, well, so do you trust an AV today? And we don't get good scores there today. And when we ask them, well, what will it make you feel safer? They say, well, I want to be able to take over control, right? Because I'm still unsure about these type of things. I want to make sure that there is a human backup driver. But think about sometimes AVs gets compared to aviation, right? When I go on a plane, I don't want to be able to take over control if something happens, right? That's not what I want to be doing. But then other things that they mentioned that will make them feel safer, more rigorous testing and inspection, experiencing the technology in demonstrations, right? So those are all things that we make public, right? But also we take as input, and it guides the work that we do. And as you can tell, safety is multifaceted, and it takes a village, really.
Yeah. Well, that's where we're different. I usually tell the pilots where I'm sitting in case they need any help on the way in. I'm going to go through. We're running out of time here, unfortunately, and we've got a number of questions that I'm going to do just kind of as a speed version. I know you guys have been posting some here, and I think we can get through these pretty quick. Is there a scenario that is, well, I'm reading them here, so otherwise I'll have to turn around. Let me just do the one that I wanted to see here. Come on, phone, don't let me down. You already did, there you are. So first of all, Maynard, point of information, RAND's AV practice is based here, taps into all of RAND's expertise across the company. So again, raise your hand, and if you're in the other room and you see that, he's in the room here if you need help. We'll start with the simulation. Cars operate differently based on the weight of the passengers, trunk cargo, et cetera. Can you guys simulate that properly?
Yes.
Weight differences?
Yes, we account for all that. We have great dynamics packages. So we provide default dynamics, but there's a lot of companies that have developed their dynamics models over many, many, many years, and we have a highly interoperable environment that they can integrate those. So we're always using the best of dynamics models that we have available.
Okay, someone asked, is the HD mapping higher on the priority list than, say, speed limits that the cities provide? Anyone? Dustin, do you have a HD better than speed limits, or is it all tied together for you, or is this a simulator question?
I think that might be more of a simulator question.
It's all tied together. They're two different things, right? HD maps, I need to understand what lane I'm in, what lane the other cars are in. It gives me more relative perspective on what's going on. Speed limits are useful, but again, I can read the signs, I can get the data, so it's very different requirements.
Going back to the weight question, I could have done this in this order, but what elements are the most difficult to test for in the scenarios?
I have an answer to this. I mean, obviously, I think it's fairly true that what's true in the real world is true also in simulation. So I would say that simulating in the middle of Canada in winter is probably it's massive snow accumulations, great covering of roads, handling all of that. Those things are hard than perfect sunny days and zero issue weather conditions.
I'm going to add to that. I just was in Western Canada last week, and following the snowplow out, had to go around a car that was stalled on the road, and you needed to follow the snowplow. So again, having just mapping center lane and everything wouldn't have worked because you would have gone into the drifts otherwise.
But
so interesting.
I'd argue that unpredictable human behavior is
human behavior.
Because you see crazy drivers out there all the time that you're shaking your head at why they did what they did.
Once again, you weren't going to talk about me, remember?
Exactly.
So yes, absolutely. Human behavior and distraction. That's the other thing I think about your daughter learning is, again, at least the sensors theoretically are always paying attention to what's going on outside the car. Finally, Tim, can you speak to the Boston mode? I just got it. Can you speak about your Boston mode? Is that... Okay, don't understand the question. We're going to take that one. I wanted to allow some time because, Ignacio, we started with you talking about GoMentum. We talked a little bit about, and I want to make sure you guys got the message across that, again, real world comparing to the simulation is what makes it work. Just wanted to conclude with you and talk about, again, as all of these presenters have talked about, again, the challenges when you think back about, all that you've had going on at GoMentum this last year since we were here last year. Is there anything about the ecosystem or things that you've learned that have made it better, different going forward?
Well, I'd say, as you can probably tell, it's a very exciting time at GoMentum now because of all this activity that's happening, and there's certainly a lot of learnings that are coming out of it, right? For us, it's just the extension of our commitment to road safety. And one thing we've learned is that safety is multifaceted, right? So today we heard about testing a vehicle on public roads and closed course and simulation and research and policy and V2X, right? And they are all pieces of this large puzzle, right? So I think we've learned that the desire to collaborate is there, and I think today's panel is a testament to that. And so I wanted to reiterate my gratitude to my co-panelists for sharing the work that we're doing, and that we're excited to continue doing.
Well, I want to thank all the panelists, those that are here and those that are far. Thank you for joining us by video. Thanks for being here, and all of you for listening to us. And you guys are going to be around for a little while longer. Contact information on the video panelists will be made available to you. And thank you very much. Nice round of applause, and thank you to the panelists.